I'm recording this podcast introduction after recording the episode with our expert guest today, which is Jane Hardwicke Collings. And let me tell you, I am amped up. So if you are someone that has been through puberty, pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, or you want to at different life stages, or you have different people in your life that are going through those different life stages, this is an episode to listen to. So Jane is a trained midwife, but she travels around Australia, and she also has an app, which I find out about in the episode, and also different trainings to help women connect to the internal wisdom of our bodies throughout different life stages. So she helps us understand things like red threads, like aligning our cycle to the moon, like understanding what the different phases of our lives are designed for and aligning them with the seasons of Mother Nature from spring, summer, autumn, and winter. So if you are someone that is alive and is a woman, I would even say that this is a really important conversation to listen to if you're 9 years old or if you're 79. Jane imparts her wisdom and knowledge that she has developed over the last 40 or 50 years of her professional career into helping us understand the internal wisdom that comes with the different stages of our life as women. So, without further ado, let's get into this episode and help you listen to your body differently. If you've ever felt dismissed, confused, or stuck in the space between symptoms and answers, you're not alone. This is What's My Body Telling Me? With me, Dr. Anthea Todd, the podcast where we believe your body isn't the problem, it's the solution. Together, we'll explore how to understand the messages your body sends through symptoms, how to support yourself through every stage of life, and why functional health, medicine, and energetics are all key to understanding and supporting your body. Here, we let feeling good become the baseline, because life's too short to feel anything but alive. So, are you ready to start listening differently? Let's get into today's episode. Today we are joined by the wonderful Jane Hardwicke Collings, and I can't tell you how excited I have been for this episode. She is a woman that I'm struggling to introduce or figure out how I can sum up the amazingness of it. So I'm going to actually leave that to Jane to introduce herself.
Thank you, Anthea, and thank you so much for inviting me here. I love the name of your podcast, Female Fundamentals, but that question, what is my body trying to tell me? What a revolutionary concept that our body is talking to us. Thank you for bringing that to everybody's mind. So to introduce myself, I'm a postmenopausal grandma. I'm in the winter of the autumn season of my life, so I'm 67 and a half. And my background is as a registered nurse and then a midwife, and I was a home birth midwife for 30 years. So I pretty much grew up in the world of home birth, which is a world where families and mothers are taking responsibility for themselves and not necessarily going along with everything that the system has to say about the rite of passage of birth. So I learned a lot there. And I started the School of Shamanic Womancraft, which is my international women's mystery school. And I've written books, I've got online courses, I teach workshops. I'm spreading the word as far and wide and fast as possible. My mission is to wake everybody up, particularly the women, like I love to say that my mission is to wake up the witches. And what I mean by witches is not a Disneyland version with a crooked nose and warts. I mean, the original meaning of the word witch is wise woman. So, my mission is to help women reconnect with their feminine knowledge, wisdom, and power through reconnection with the women's mysteries.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that ties in exactly what you said at the start, the name of this podcast, like what is my body trying to tell me? And it's almost leaning into that wisdom that we have internally, but we've become so detached from in different phases of our life. And that's one of the things that I know you are so incredible at. And it's understanding that wisdom that we all have at different stages of our development, but then also at different stages of our menstrual cycle when we are cycling. So that's really what I wanted to
Mm.
touch on today, is going, okay, well, what is the wisdom that we have in our body at the different life stages? Because I think, as you sort of alluded to, society can pathologize, or being a witch is a negative thing. Being in tune with the body is a negative thing. Listening to the body, it's
Mm.
like put all of our symptoms down. They're not good to experience, but really it's our body
Mm.
trying to tell us something, and it has a lot of wisdom. So that's really what I wanted to bring you on today, to help women understand, oh my gosh, there's actually so much wisdom that we have at different stages of our life. So I know you touched on that you are in the winter autumn phase of your life. What does that mean?
Mm. Well, this is a great map to help us know where we are and therefore what to expect of that life phase or that stage in that life phase. So, in the work that I teach and the work that is the women's mysteries, so I didn't make any of this up. This is ancient knowledge that we're bringing into the modern day so that we can be with the questions, like you're saying, like what's going on actually. So,
Mhm.
just like the earth has seasons, spring, summer, autumn, winter, so too do we. We are as if the earth, and we go through the same cycles that the earth goes through. And to understand where we are in our life cycle is really helpful to understand, therefore, what to expect and how to be with it. So we have our spring season, which is our maidenhood, and that goes from 0 to 25. So that's the spring of our lives. And we have rites of passage scattered throughout the seasons of our lives. And so the spring of our lives starts with our birth, how we were born. And that information, which is called our birth imprint, stays with us forever. That's why birth
Mm.
matters. You know, it's not just some random day to endure. Not only is it a rite of passage for the mother, but it is the formation of the birth imprint that plays out all the time, every day for that person who was born. So
So
each
that's,
of us, yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, is that just the actual birth, or is it also the pregnancy of when we're in our mother's womb as well? And I know a lot of people, we talk about how generationally we are in our grandmother's ovaries. So does that spring season also sort of account for that as well? I know you said
Exactly.
0 to 25, but
Yep.
just generally
So we
25.
come in at 0, like before, with the inheritance that we get, whether we realize it or not, from our red thread, our mother line. And as you said,
Mm.
we're in our mother's ovaries, actually, in our grandmother's womb at 20 weeks
Uh-huh.
gestation of the pregnancy our grandmother has of our mother. So we're present in our mother's body for a very long time and present in our grandmother's body in our mother's ovary as our prima materia, which is our original selves, the premature egg. So we have a lot of time there to pick up the story, the wounded behaviors and the strengths of our red thread. So that's like the ecosystem we arrive into. And then our birth imprint is created, formed in our mother's womb. So the birth imprint is not just how you came out. It includes, like you said, the pregnancy, but also the story of the conception, as well as the influence of the red thread, the mother line. So our birth imprint includes whatever the impact of our red thread is, plus the story of our conception, which is basically, were you planned and wanted or something else? The
Mhm.
pregnancy our mother had of us, we want to know this in chronological order, all the things that she had to do, was challenged by, things that changed in our lives, because that impacts us when we grow things. So the conception impacts how we get ideas. The pregnancy story of us influences how we bring things to life. And the birth, which is how we got out, impacts how we finish things, completely impacted by how we brought things to life. And then the postnatal experience of us, our first month, influences how we look after the things we create. So our birth imprint, we don't necessarily give birth how we were born, although that often happens, but our birth imprint, in the way I just described, plays out when we birth things. So in our creativity, and also whenever we're engaged in a process, anything that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, our birth imprint plays out. And how we're born, therefore, our birth imprint is not a curse. It's simply a pattern to come to learn about and recognize and figure out how to work with it rather than be worked by it. So that's what the
Wow.
birth imprint is, and it's huge, you know? So birth really does
My
matter.
mind is racing with I'm one of 5 kids, and most of our births were similar. Midwives, mum was at a hospital, but no interventions. Um, but I know my older sister, she had to be put in a humidity crib straight away afterwards. None of the others did. I think about one of my friends who she was clinically dead and had to be resuscitated when she was born, was rushed out and she was premature. So it's really interesting what you're saying. And I'm thinking about how they birth things in the world now and their relationship to that. I'm like, oh wow, that is actually really fascinating to look at the link. So it's what you're saying is it's not necessarily how, like, for instance, my birth with me, my mum didn't have any interventions, was at a hospital, but had a midwife, and um, there was no real complications. Are you saying, like, for me, that's generally the thread that if I were to give birth, but then also me birthing actual ideas and concepts into the world as well? So it's both?
Yeah, it's both. And as I said, we don't necessarily give birth how we were born because a lot of other things happen before we give birth that will
Mm,
impact how we give birth. So the birth imprint is most often seen in our creativity or our work.
mhm,
Or, as I said, when we're engaged in a process, even in a cycle of a day, you know, your birth imprint plays out. So that again, what I want to say and really stress is it's not a curse how you were born. You just have to
mhm,
figure out how to work with it. So, for example, somebody who, like your friend, yourself, you had no intervention and no complications at your actual birth. So that should indicate that you will finish things without any need for intervention and without complications. But we need to bring in the story of the pregnancy your mother had of you because that will impact how. So,
mm.
what number baby are you?
I'm third of 5.
Okay, so, you know, mum had 2 presumably small people at the same time she was pregnant with you,
Yeah.
and we can just imagine how busy she was and whatever else, how that was affecting her. So anything else that happened during that pregnancy will chronologically affect your process in how you bring things to life, how you make things happen. So even
It's
just down
That's
to
really, really interesting. So I'm laughing because there's a lot of things that I've done to remove the word busy from my vocabulary. But it's interesting when you're saying, "Oh, she was probably very busy," and she is a busy type of woman. She's got 5 kids, runs a very big organization, grandkids, all the things now, but back then also very busy. That's really, really interesting. And I think about my younger brother, who's got the most patience out of all of us 5 kids, and there was a bigger gap between him
Mm,
and my mum actually allowed
mm,
herself to slow down. So that's
mm.
really, really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and how busy might show up for you is like in preparation for something or whatever, and it might. I'm making this up. I'm
Mhm.
imagining, and it might feel hectic and like, oh, this is all happening too fast, or I'm too slow. I can't keep up, or something like that. And if
Yeah.
that were the case, and I'm not saying it necessarily is, that the how to work with it rather than be worked by it would be to recognize here I come to the hectic part of me making something happen. What do I need? Oh, I need to slow down. And then to actually bring an intervention into there when your busyness to say, okay, no, stop. Now I'm going to go and have a cup of tea or
Mm,
go for a walk with bare feet on the earth so that it grounds me and calms me down and return back when I'm feeling calmer rather than going in this hectic pace. So it's things
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, that is really, really fascinating. I love my mind is just going crazy. I know probably the listeners are too. So after we go through that, so in terms of the 0 to 25,
Mhm.
that's around creativity, how we birth things.
Well, no, it's much more than that because the 0 to 25 is bisected by our menarche rite of passage, our
Mm,
first period, our initiation into womanhood. So average age is 13, but whenever it happens. So that's the first teaching of this cycles of the seasons of our lives, is that 0 to when we get our period for the first time, that's the entire length of childhood. It's
Mm.
probably the most influential part of our lives, and it's really short. And in our culture, there's this kind of rushing through it and growing these children up faster than they would if they weren't being, grown up too fast. So I think that that's something that that we need to notice to maintain childhood, keep it safe and as a child. And then at
Mm.
13, we have that next rite of passage into womanhood. And this is the most important thing to understand about the life seasons and phases and stages of our lives, is the effect of a rite of passage. Now, rites of passage are not some new age thing. They're traditional things that traditional cultures have been doing forever. And and more women and people are bringing awareness to the concept of a rite of passage, because it is a time in our lives when we transform. We change from one version of ourselves into the next version of ourselves, never to return to that previous version. So this is what happens at menarche, but just jumping ahead, it also happens at every pregnancy. Every pregnancy results in a birth. Whatever ends a pregnancy is a birth, whether it's a loss or an abortion or a live baby. And then fast forward to every pregnancy, and then menopause. So all of what I'm going to say now about how a rite of passage works is happening at all of those. And one rite of passage leads to the next. So how rites of passage work is that whatever happens, so think menarche, pregnancy, birth, and menopause, whatever happens, whatever doesn't happen, who's there, what they say, what doesn't get said, and whatever's going on in your world at the time, teaches you, the person going through menarche, birth, menopause, the experience you have teaches you how your culture values the next role you're going into. So menarche, that's woman; birth, that's mother; menopause, that's the second half of your life and your wise woman years. So whatever happens teaches you how your culture values that next role, and therefore how you need to behave to be accepted by your culture in that role. So back at menarche, which, is something that is a rite of passage that definitely carries your red thread story in it, because mothers usually initiate their daughters into womanhood in the same way they were, unless they've thought, oh, I can do better than that. Or maybe it was great anyway, but probably unlikely, depending on your age. So mothers say like, I'm going to do my inner work. I'm going to heal my own menarche, because if you don't heal your own menarche, you're just passing on that energy of what it means to be a woman. And then they initiate their daughters, welcome their daughters into menarche in an empowering way, and that changes everything. So at menarche, all of us were initiated into womanhood by and instructed subliminally, like we get taught. We don't even realize we're being taught. We're being enculturated, which is just a nice way of saying brainwashed, into how we're supposed to behave to be accepted. So the other thing that's happening at menarche is the veil of estrogen descends upon us. And this is with us until menopause. And estrogen is known as the hormone of accommodation and self-sacrifice. And what
Mm.
that looks like when the period starts is, overwhelmed by this hormonal change, we kind of we accommodate everybody else's needs and desires of us in being a woman. So we want to look like all the other girls around the same age. We want to wear the same clothes. We want to go to the same places. We want to belong. And we sacrifice who we were pre-menarche to become this little woman and fit in. And
Mm.
then this is when we have babies, this is what gets the babies looked after. Hormone of accommodation and self-sacrifice. And it also happens because later in the summer season of our lives, as we progress, I'll just jump ahead a bit, we conceive, gestate, birth, and need to look after all manner of things besides humans. Careers, businesses, new versions of ourselves, big projects, the things that change us, and all this same stuff I'm talking about plays out in them too. And the most common words with this veil of estrogen fully covering us around child rearing is, oh, let's just do what's best for the children. I know I haven't eaten. You have it. Or, oh, we're running late. You run ahead. I'll catch up after I've cleaned up after all of us. Like
Mhm.
things like that. I'm kind of taking the piss a bit, but it's actually
Yes.
nature's way of how the children get looked after. And it feels good. We want to do that. It feels good. And then, so back to how a rite of passage works, that's what happened at menarche. And then menarche, whatever age, and then to 25. Now, there's not actually a physical rite of passage, but there is definitely an emotional and psychological aspect to turning 25 or 24 or
I'm
26.
curious on this part, what happens if a woman is on a contraceptive? Because I know from a physiological hormonal state, I've been taught that, say for instance, you get your menarche, your first period at age 12, and you go on the pill at age 13, and now you're 25. Really, your reproductive age is 1, not whatever, 8 plus 15 is 13 years. So it's because
Well,
you've been on the pill for that amount of time. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
yeah. Well, the oral contraceptive pill and other hormonal contraceptives, but we want to hope that no early teenagers are having any of those things done, but they're more something that happens later. And to go on the oral contraceptive pill at, in your early teens is really like it's going to affect you, because what happens with the pill is it changes 150 mechanisms in your body, and it takes years for the menstrual cycle to kind of settle for someone who starts. And so girls get put on the pill for acne, when that's probably there's a lot of other things that you can do before you change your hormone profile to treat acne, or
Mm.
or on the pill to regulate irregular cycles. Irregular cycles are normal for teenagers, and you don't make your menstrual cycle regular with the pill, you switch it off. And the pill creates this kind of pseudo pregnant state in the body. And what happens with that is you're in this kind of limbo land that if you go on the pill really early, you wouldn't even notice there's anything different to anything other, because you probably haven't had enough experience of having a menstrual cycle. But for women who take the pill later in their lives and then go off it, they notice what it felt like when they were on the pill. And it's kind of like this space where they're, like they're different. And the difference is that it's kind of like a pseudo pregnant state. And how that actually shows up in a really sad and negative way is that when women are on the pill, they're attracted to a different kind of man than they would be attracted if they were not on the pill. And this is because in this pseudo pregnant state, you're attracted to men that are more like family, who will look after you because you're in this kind of pseudo pregnant state. And then when, you meet your mate, go off the pill, and all of a sudden he doesn't smell right. And the smell is the pheromones sort of smell.
Oh.
And, women think, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I loved him yesterday. I want to have babies with him, and now I don't. Oh, it must be something wrong with me. And then
Mm.
they, carry on with the plan. And then, interestingly, this is what we're learning is connected to the miscarriage rates, the infertility, and the divorce rates. Because when you're not on the pill, you're attracted to a mate who has as different as possible genetic material as you, because that's what ensures the highest likelihood of the concepsus, the egg plus sperm, surviving. So the pill completely changes us. And I think that they should include that in the hugely big long form that is all the side
The
effects. Number
leaflet.
one, you will be attracted to somebody that you will not be attracted to when you go off the pill, you know?
Yes. Yeah, I think
So,
it's really interesting that rites of passage, how you've sort of punctuated that as, well, there's puberty marked by menarche. Obviously, we get
mhm.
pubertal changes before that, but our first period and then moving into that sort of, well, is that, what is that, spring to, what's after
Summer.
spring? Summer. So summer is really that time where you're that 25 plus, and then as you mentioned, like that rite of passage is pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
fair to
that's
say in
right.
your
Yeah. So at 25, we move into the summer or mother season or creatrix season of our lives. Because, as I said earlier, we conceive, gestate, birth, and need to look after all manner of things besides humans. Like this podcast is one of your babies, so to speak, and you have to look
Mm.
after it and it won't
Well,
survive if
when
you
I
don't look
when I wrote
after it.
my book, it was everyone's like, "Oh, you birthed a book." And it is that sort of it's
Totally.
an interesting thing because it's a creative thing. You're creating something and then it's like, well, now you have to birth it. And my editor, I called her my book midwife. So I'm like, she
Yes.
actually really helped me midwife my book into the world. So it is I didn't get that when people said that when I was writing it. But then once I
Mm.
actually launched, I was like, yeah, I haven't actually
Yeah.
given birth to a physical person yet, but yeah, it did sort of feel like a birthing experience, which is really interesting. So you're saying this stage is that creative birthing sort of stage.
Totally. Totally. And just before we leave 25, just to put her in context and on the map in the place and way she deserves to be, is that the 25-year-old female is the version of the feminine that the patriarch idolizes. So
Mm.
everybody, wherever they are on the cycle, if they're under the patriarchal spell, thinks that for them to qualify as desirable, beautiful, youthful, whatever, they have to look like the 25-year-old version of themselves, which, look, there's all kinds of ways people do that, but it's not a sustainable practice. And a 25-year-old is idolized because of her youth and beauty and availability, which is
Mhm.
what a patriarchy is all about. So 25 is a place where, look, sadly, as we all reflect back, we were probably the most amazing, gorgeous version of ourselves, but we didn't realize that. We were always thinking that was something wrong and trying to fix whatever. But anyway, that's a major source of both inspiration and depression that you can't
Mm.
be 25 all your life, and a
Particularly
lot of
now with
money.
yeah, a lot of
Mm,
money. I live on the Gold Coast and there's a lot of it's everywhere around the world, but a lot
mm.
of people that are it's almost like there's this biohacking longevity. Now it's turned to longevity. It's like, is it longevity or is it you don't want to age?
Yeah,
Because
anti-aging, yeah.
yes, it's all these anti-aging things because aging is a negative thing, but
Mm,
it's not. But there's like societally, there seems to be a lot of this, yeah, pressure. And
which
it's interesting, like from an evolutionary standpoint, if you are at that patriarchal lens of, well, you're worthy when you're fertile and you look
yes,
young and you have
yes.
that first half of your cycle, which is estrogen dominant. And you've mentioned that estrogen side of things, which is like, oh, you placate, you feel a bit more um, voluptuous or like you want to be. It's the thing that makes you feel sort of sexy in a way and also go reproduce. It's the thing that makes you want to reproduce, but you might turn a bit of a blind eye to behavior that you shouldn't stand for, possibly.
Totally, exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
How many times have you been told everything looks fine while you still feel exhausted, bloated, anxious, have skin issues, period pain, and totally feel off? Without saying it, people are thinking it's all in your head. But you know something isn't right. Your body knows it too. And let me tell you, your symptoms, they aren't random. They're messages. Messages that blood tests don't always pick up because they only show a snapshot in time. Great when you're bad enough to need medication or surgery, not so great when you want to make sense of your body. If you really want to understand what's happening beneath the surface, that's where Test Your Fundamentals comes in. This isn't just another test, it's a functional health tool that gives you real answers. Using HDMA or hair tissue mineral analysis, it gives you a 3-month report card of how your body's been functioning, internally and externally, showing exactly why you're feeling the way you do. Unlike standard blood work, HDMA can detect nutrient imbalances, heavy metals, and deficiencies that could be wreaking havoc on your hormones, mood, metabolism, and gut. So instead of guessing what supplements you need or throwing money at another miracle diet, this gives you real, personalized answers about what your body actually needs. Here's how it works. You'll get a personalized HTMA test, a breakdown of your results in plain English, access to practitioner quality supplements, and a step-by-step lifestyle recommendations tailored to your 4 fundamentals. So you know exactly how to support your body your way. Your body isn't broken and it's always working for you. You just need the right tools to listen. That's what Test Your Fundamentals gives you. So if you're ready to stop guessing and start taking action, head to femalefundamentals.com.au and order your Test Your Fundamentals hair test today. There's also a link in our show notes.
Yeah. So then the summer or creatrix life season is from 25 to whatever age you are at menopause. So that's the summer. And then, so just to say, remember I said I'm in the winter of my autumn? Okay, so we can divide each season, spring, summer, autumn, winter, into 4 seasons. So there is an inner season within each season. So that is characterized by the characterization of what each season's about. So spring is about new beginnings, hope, and potential. Summer is about full bloom and fruiting. Autumn, so now let's go to menopause, is the end of summer. And perimenopause, so perimenopause, premenopause, menopause, postmenopause, I think everybody is so confused about what is it?
Yeah.
And so I've decided to rename it. Now, you know how you mentioned already adolescence.
Yes.
So everybody knows what that is. And, you know, it's the becoming an adult, and it takes as long as it takes. And it's kind of questionable, actually, whether some people even do become adults.
Yeah.
But, you know, they become their version of an adult. So then the next rite of passage is childbirth, and that's called matrescence. So adolescence, matrescence. Have you heard of matrescence?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So
Oscar Theralak is an amazing doctor that talks a lot about that. Yes.
Yep, great. So that term was coined back in the 1970s by a woman called Dana Raphael to describe the becoming a mother, rather than like, bang, you're a mother. You become a mother in the same way as you become an adult. And that becoming, which you'll know from Oscar's teachings, is like a big part of it is deciding how you're going to be, you know, what kind of mother are you going to be, and all of that. And then, so adolescence, matrescence, and instead of menopause, premenopause, blah, 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 sagescence, the becoming a wise woman. And it takes however long it takes. So that's what happens at the end of summer and the beginning of autumn. And so just dividing up those inner seasons. So how old are you?
I'm 31.
31. Okay. So how old were you when you had your first period?
12.
12. So theoretically, and without pathology, we can expect that we'll have our menstrual cycle for about 40 years. So give or take a year either side. At what would you say? You're 12?
Yes.
Yeah. So then we could imagine that if you were going to have a physiological menopause, that it would happen at 52. So
which is
give
when
or
my
take.
mum went through hers.
There you go. And did she have her menarche at the same age as well, 12?
I believe she did. I don't
Yeah.
think she can remember back that
Yeah.
much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's something also that would be good for women to know. And that's obviously only physiological menopause, because there's other kinds of menopause. There's premature menopause, which is rare. And like 7% of women get their menopause before 40. So it's rare, but happens and needs to be considered. And then there's surgical menopause, and then there's chemical menopause. So surgical menopause, it would happen with the ovaries being removed. You can have a hysterectomy, and if your ovaries stay in, then you still cycle, but you don't have a womb, so you don't have blood. So you still have the ovulatory cycle and then go through menopause. But surgical menopause is if your ovaries are taken out. And then chemical menopause happens when women are given estrogen blocking drugs for cancer, because estrogen makes things grow. So having an estrogen blocker is part of trying to make the tumor stop growing, but you go into instant menopause. So within whatever, so you're 31, and we're going to suppose that you're going to have your menopause at 52. So we can say between 25 and 52 is 27 years. So let's say 28, because that's easy maths. So we'll divide your summer into 4 7-year periods. 25 plus 7 is 32. So you're in the final year of the spring of your summer. So that's
Mhm.
equivalent to what you've already experienced in the final year of the spring of your spring. So there's a spiral loop that connects when we're at the beginning, middle, end of whatever season we're in. There's like a next level of whatever the issues or growths or challenges were at that. So that's interesting to look at as well. But so say next year or the year after, you go into the beginning of the summer of your summer, which is the peak of your life. Now, peak doesn't mean necessarily greatest. It's the peak, like it's the full moon of your life. It's the equivalent to the summer solstice of your life. It's the summer, which is hectic, it's
Mm,
busy, it's
mm.
reproduction, it's creating, so watch
And
what
it's
you do.
almost like
You'll probably
harvesting the things that you've sort of planted in a
Well,
way.
no, that happens
Oh,
later. You can only
okay.
harvest after they've come to full bloom and fruited. So the
Okay.
inner autumn season is about harvesting, and then the
Okay.
inner winter season is about the distillation and the essence. So think of the growth cycle. It goes
Mhm.
birth, growth, full bloom, harvest, decay, death, rebirth, growth, full bloom, harvest, decay, death, rebirth.
Mhm.
Everything goes through the cycle. So
Okay.
some just at different speeds. So for some cycles, it's metaphoric. For some cycles, it's literal. For some, it's a combination. So I would
Mm.
say for you to expect in the next couple of years, you'll be going into an even more creative time of your life. And,
Mhm.
whatever that looks like. So for me, at the end of my autumn, so the autumn season goes from menopause, whatever age, to 70 when we shift into the winter or crone season of our lives. And that's where I'm at now. So I'm 2 and a bit years away from becoming the crone, the elder, basically.
Mhm.
And so in the winter of my autumn, if you're still staying with me with this map, for me now, everything is distilled. Everything, I can see everything for its essence. And I can
Mm.
see what needs to change. I can see what needs to be recreated soon and all of that kind of stuff. So this is also the winter of your summer is sagescence, the
Mm.
perimenopausal journey. So for go on.
'Cause I was going to say, it's really interesting because you were saying, "Oh, I'm going into my summer of my summer." Yes? Am I getting that correct?
Correct?
So and that I'm noticing I'm like, "Oh, I'm excited about that, like, summer's really great and all the things," and then I was thinking there might be people listening to this that are like, "Well, I'm in my autumn," or "I'm in my" I don't think there'll be anyone that's in their winter, but they might be in their winter if they're listening to this, but generally they're not in their 70s. Um, and I was thinking, how would they be feeling? But I think it's really important to remember that every stage is important, and I think that's the
Oh,
main thing that we want to remember is that every stage of your life as a woman gives you what you need and gives you that wisdom
mm,
at that time.
most certainly, and is affected by everything that's happened before. The thing
Mm,
about menopause and the autumn season of our lives, just think of the garden, think of nature. Autumn is the harvest season. It's the time when the fruits of summer are available. It's the harvest. It's the time to share your wisdom. It's also the time of letting go. Think of the deciduous trees. It's time
mhm,
to let go. And then it's also as we progress through the autumn season. So let's say you have your menopause at 50, and you go into that's the average age, and you go into the winter of your life, the cronehood at 70, then within that autumn season, there will be the harvest, decay, and letting go, and then moving into the next phase with what happens at the end of autumn in nature in the garden is that we have the seeds. After the fruit
mhm,
has decayed, after the vegetables have decayed, what's left are the seeds. So there we have at the end, like where I am basically, at the
mhm,
end of the autumn of my life, I have the seeds, which are the results of everything that I've experienced from my red thread and my birth all the way up until now, my wisdom is distilled into seeds which I will gestate in the winter and serve the life cycle of them. So it's just a map. I don't say just a map. I think it's a great map, and it's the wisdom of the cycles, which actually is common knowledge that's kind of not that common anymore. And the cycles are running our lives whether we realize it or not. So it's actually kind of smart to reconnect with the wisdom of the cycles, so that because it's going to be affecting whatever we're doing. So this map is helpful in understanding our life seasons and also the effect of our rites of passage. So I just want to add one thing before we go on to the next thing. But at menarche, when we become a woman, that's the woman completely enculturated by her experience into how she's supposed to behave as a woman to be accepted. That's who shows up to give birth. And then we learn through our birthing experiences and our rite of passage of birthing, and this can be humans or other than humans. What we learn is a lot about ourselves because our births are our teachers. And the quality that we learn about ourselves birthing a baby, or for you, this baby or your book baby, the quality you learn about yourself in birthing a person or whatever is the quality you need to bring to mothering or nurturing it to keep it going. So there's lots of important teachings that happen during the summer of our lives through all our rites of passage of birthing. And then all of that shows up at menopause. So menopause is when we have feedback, biofeedback for our lifestyle from zero to that point. And that's why, if we have this perspective, if we understand this map, there won't be any surprises at menopause. It's the result of your life so far. And it shows you all the things that need to change so that you can move into the next half of your life as healthily as possible. You've got to stop smoking cigarettes. You've got to stop drinking alcohol. You need to reduce the caffeine content intake and to reduce your stress. Otherwise, it's going to be messy.
Well, I think it's really interesting. I use this analogy. I think about, I explain this to patients. It's punctuated by those sort of rites of passage. I talk about the 4 Ps, the great magnifiers: puberty, pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause. So sort of where you're noticing those rites of passage and those seasonal changes to some degree. Obviously, pregnancy and postpartum are still in that summertime. But I explain it sort of like swimming at a beach. So before you get your first period, it's like your hormones are a lake. You can swim in a lake. It's pretty good. There's no ups and downs in your hormones. It's pretty easy to swim. And then your brain and your ovaries start to communicate. You're like, whoa, what's happening here? I'm getting these surges of estrogen and progesterone, a little bit of testosterone. That's all coming out. And all of a sudden you've been thrown at the beach on the Gold Coast. And you're like, what? I've been used to swimming in a lake. So it can sometimes feel like you're drowning in symptoms. But then you move to pregnancy, and pregnancy is a different beach altogether. There's rips in different directions. The currents have changed. The waves might be bigger, might be small, and you're thinking, oh, I have to learn how to navigate this now. Postpartum, a different beach again. Perimenopause, a different beach again. So it's almost like, oh, okay, things do change. And it's not that there's an issue with the beach. It's just a different beach. So you have to navigate it in a different way. But the thing is, because it's interesting, and I'm really curious your perspective on this. Some people breeze through pregnancy. They love it. They feel amazing. Some people really struggle. Same with puberty, same with postpartum, same with perimenopause. And what I see from a physiological standpoint is that, because I talk about the 4 fundamentals and when you can care for them from a physiological standpoint of the nervous system, metabolism, nutrients, and blood sugars, like I know you were mentioning before, cigarettes probably stop doing that, and all the toxins and things. But when we care for them, it's almost like they are the foundation. They are the Earth's crust, the seabed floor underneath all the waves. So if you were to be swimming at a beach, but all of a sudden there was an earthquake and that seabed floor, you were in your pregnancy beach, but then all of a sudden that seabed floor shifted, the waves get really big. It's a tsunami. So then all of a sudden you get all these different symptoms. So that's how I sort of explain it, is sometimes when we're going through these stages, it can magnify to us that, hey, there's something underneath the surface that I haven't been caring for that my body's trying to tell me. And I can't hide from it anymore. This life stage is really going to highlight it to me. I need to listen to the wisdom of it, is essentially
Mm.
how I sort of view it. But I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, I completely agree. I love your analogy of the beaches. And for an Aussie, that kind of makes so much sense because we would be going from beach to beach for the waves or for the stillness or whatever. So that's cool. But I agree. So basically, the way that I would say that would be that at each rite of passage, part of a rite of passage is that you are who you are before, and one rite of passage leads to the next. So it influences it. It influences it. As I mentioned earlier, she who is initiated into womanhood at menarche shows up at childbirth completely enculturated into how she's supposed to behave as a mother. And in our culture, all you have to do is look at the birth statistics that happen around, well, birth, obviously, as a readout of how women are navigating that rite of passage. And currently in Australia, and it's going to be common in similar in other Western cultures, less than 50% of women push their babies out of their vaginas now. So women are
Oh,
going into, that's terrible. So women are entering pregnancy, birth, and motherhood with different attitudes to what one would hope for, such that that's what happens. So the other big piece here is that what we are also initiated into at menarche, besides womanhood, is menstrual shame. Now, menstrual shame, our menstrual cycle runs our life for 40 years, and everybody who lives under the same roof as us. And if you don't believe them, just ask them. So when we're initiated into womanhood and we are initiated into menstrual shame, it's not like, it's tragic. So menstrual shame leads to body shame, and body shame leads to low self-esteem, and low self-esteem leads to all manner of wounded behaviors, including body dysmorphia, eating disorders, self-harm, and risky and dangerous sexual decision-making. So that's who's growing up and headed towards childbirth. Now, there's a wonderful woman in Queensland, Sharon Maloney, who did a PhD on how menstrual shame affects childbirth. And this is what we're seeing. And she also has a wonderful quote that menstrual shame is one of the organizing principles of the patriarchy to maintain the oppression of women. Now, this is heavy, and it's true. Like women, like there's menstrual shame everywhere, not just women. And so how she found with her PhD that menstrual shame affects childbirth is that there's lots more intervention, because women are not going into childbirth thinking, oh my God, my body is amazing. I can
mm,
perform a miracle. I am in connection with my body. I know how she speaks to me because I've practiced that in my menstrual cycle. That's not what's happening. They've been
mm,
led to believe that their menstrual cycle is an inconvenience, a mess, something you can turn off, and why wouldn't you? And so they miss out on this development of cycle intelligence and body literacy, which is what the menstrual cycle is a great teacher for. So get to childbirth, not trusting your body, not trusting the process, not even understanding how your body talks to you. And then that happens that you have increased intervention because that's the way it goes. And you do one thing in terms of intervention in childbirth, it's called the cascade of intervention, and you usually need to do the next and the next and the next.
mm,
So that's what's leading to the intervention. And that's what we can see is the effect of the childbirth rite of passage having been affected by the menarche rite of passage and menstrual shame. So then everything comes out at menopause. Everything that's unhealed comes out at menopause in that feedback scenario, like as
mm,
Dr. Christian Northrup says, everything that you've swept under the carpet comes out at menopause, because menopause is the rite of passage that's designed to heal all the unhealed parts of us. It's when this estrogen veil rises. Remember the estrogen veil? So about the first thing that happens at menopause is that progesterone goes down. And going down is not bad, it's just going down. And progesterone is a mild sedative. Now, we might never have realized that we were mildly sedated in our fertile years, but we definitely realize when we are no longer mildly sedated. And everybody says, what's wrong with you? You're so cranky and jumpy. And you're changing every day and blah, and blah. You know, the first thing that happens at menopause is we wake up. We wake up from being mildly sedated. And a lot of women wake up very mad because they realize they had no idea what was going on. They didn't even know their menstrual cycle was important, or that childbirth was something that they could prepare for. And then here we are at menopause, and all the unhealed parts come out. So this estrogen veil rises, and the hormone of accommodation and self-sacrifice starts going down. And then the most uttered words are things like, how come I'm the only one who does anything around here? Pick up your washing. I didn't pick it up yesterday and it was okay. Well, it's not okay today. You've changed. Yes, I've changed. And that can be a shock if you're not expecting it for everybody, yourself and your family or whoever you're around. So, you know, just like we've realized it's a good idea to prepare for childbirth, it's also a very good idea to prepare for menopause. It's also a very good idea to help our daughters, nieces, girls prepare for menarche, you know? So education and preparation is so important because we're not broken, we're cyclical. We have our reference map from nature. You know, there is nothing in nature that's healthy that keeps growing or that stays the same and doesn't change. So there's so much we can learn from nature. And just to say another thing about the menstrual cycle, the sad thing is that, well, not just the menstrual cycle, but all our portals to feminine power, the menstrual cycle, childbirth, and menopause, have all been pathologized, medicalized, weaponized against us, and monetized. You know, like we're encouraged to reject the menstrual cycle, turn it off, ignore it, whatever. And we do so to our
then
peril.
all of a sudden fall pregnant. Then it's like, okay, now I
Exactly.
need to, yeah.
Yeah. And missed out on all that how my body talks to me. So the menstrual cycle has actually, just in the late 1990s, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, one of the versions of God in our culture, declared that the menstrual cycle is our fifth vital sign. So temperature, pulse, blood pressure, respiration, and the menstrual cycle. That's how you tell the well-being of a woman. You know, so it's very different to the curse that you want to switch off. So the menstrual cycle is like the most amazing transformational cycle. There is so much personal growth and self-development available to every woman in the menstrual cycle that she could possibly want.
Body break. Just for a moment, imagine this. What if your body was your biggest supporter, your closest friend, your most loyal cheerleader? What if it loved you fully and unconditionally, no matter what? Place a hand somewhere that feels steady and let your breath soften. Now ask, if your body could speak to you right now, what would it say? Maybe something like, I've been here all along and I'm proud of you. I'm not in your way. I'm on your side. Let those words settle and inhale and exhale. Your body is always looking out for you, and all you have to do is listen. So when someone, for instance, and it's really interesting, sometimes my menstrual cycle is 28 days. It goes with the moon. I think that would actually be an interesting thing to touch on. I was just reading through your PDF on your website. So if anyone's listening to this and wants to learn more, I would highly recommend downloading that from Jane. It's amazing. My friends and I, it was a full moon in Aries yesterday or the day before. And we went, it was actually hilarious. We went and skinny dipped in the ocean. We live, fortunately, a block from the beach. We waited until it was dark, obviously, saged ourselves and went in the full moon and was splashing around and yahooing and doing all the things. And then we came back and I happened to have a tuning fork on the kitchen bench because one of my housemates, she thought she broke her toe, so I needed to check if she had or not. But anyway, I was ringing the tuning fork, and then we were like humming to it together, and we we're trying to match the pitch. And then I was like, this is just, it's such an interesting ritual that we've all sort of come to. We've been together, we've been in the moon, in nature, and now we're coming and we're sort of making the same noise together and sort of matching the pitch and everything. So I thought that was really, really interesting. But the thing that I wanted to touch on with this is, with my menstrual cycle, I'm ovulation with full moon. One of my other housemates is a week out from her period. The other one has just finished her period. So in terms of your cycle with the moon, is there a time where we ideally should be syncing up with the moon or not? Like, how does that work? Because I know a lot of people talk about, oh, I get my period on the full moon, or I ovulate on the full moon. What does that mean?
Well, that is an opportunity these days, which I'll get to. But basically, the menstrual cycle and the lunar cycle are connected. You know, like the story goes that back before electricity dominated our lives, and that's the late 1800s. So that's probably, well, that's my great-grandparents. So probably double great for you or something. So back before electricity dominated our lives and we could extend day to whenever we turn the light off, that we have a switch in our heads that is monitoring the amount of light in the night sky and the production of melatonin, the darkness hormone, around that light. And like everything's interconnected, the melatonin production is connected to the estrogen progesterone production. And so the story goes, back before electricity dominated our lives and created a whole lot of light pollution, such that this switch doesn't work anymore. The story goes that women ovulated on the full moon and bled on the dark and new moon and were in sync with the moon and each other. Now, that won't be everybody, but, you know, that's the story. And then with light pollution, it just screws that whole process up, and women are not necessarily in sync with the moon. Now, it's a wonderful thing to be in sync with the moon because life's a little bit less complex, because the lunar cycle's affecting you and your menstrual cycle's affecting you. And if they're aligned, that's just one effect as opposed to two opposites or whatever. So this day and age, it's not necessarily expected or even necessarily possible for a lot of women to synchronize with the moon. Women in cultures that are disconnected from technology and electricity and all of that, story goes that they are more likely to be in sync with the moon, as are women who live in the country, but, you know, where there's no light pollution. But nowadays, that's, you know, the majority of people don't live in those sorts of scenarios. So their cycle is just whenever their cycle is around the lunar cycle. Although you can do all kinds of things to try to resynchronize with the moon, and that is to pay attention to the moon and commit yourself to notice what phase the moon is and how that feels and all of that kind of stuff, you know, because it affects everybody. The phase of the moon affects your inner world, your emotions and your mood and anything in process. So monitoring and kind of tracking where you are in your menstrual cycle, it's also really helpful to track where you are in your where we are in the lunar cycle and where you are in your life season and where you are in the earth season, because all those things add up to make you feel the way you do on any particular day. And that's why I created my app, the Spinning Wheels app. It's the only holistic menstrual cycle charting app that also tells you what the lunar phase is, what the earth season phase is, and what to do about the different full moons and what to do at a dark moon and how that's where you are with your menstrual cycle. So it's like
That's incredible. What's the app called again?
It's called the Spinning Wheels, and it's available on, you know, in app stores or whatever. I'll just show you the picture.
Yeah.
This is what it looks
I'll link
like.
it in. Okay, incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
So, you know, there's also a menopause dashboard as well. So there's all kinds of things going on. It gives you a daily reading about where you're at. It gives you the calendar so you know when you're going to bleed next or when your high performance set time is or your rest time. So and where the moon is and what time and what to do about that and all of that. So it's my life work in an app, basically. It's how to live a cyclical life, because you are, whether you're paying attention or not. So that's important. But in terms of what it means now, to bleed
Mm.
on a full moon or ovulate on a full moon. So if you ovulate on the full moon, you're in sync with the lunar cycle. And if you say the opposite, if you bleed on a full moon, it's like, so the energy of bleeding is more like you want to be alone. It's an inward space. It's like if you've heard of the red tent, it's the time when you would want to actually take yourself away from the busyness of your life and rest and listen and engage in the superpowers of the bleeding phase of our menstrual cycle, which are intuition, groundedness, and deep connection with the earth. And there's this wonderful saying, if you've got a problem, bleed on it. Like, take it
Oh,
to your
yeah.
menstrual time, you're bleeding, and you'll come up with a solution. So
Mm.
bleeding on a full moon is like going into that menstrual cave or whatever, but all the lights are on. So everything you need to let go of is very obvious. So wherever you are in your menstrual cycle, it's dominating your life experience. And then you are also impacted by the moon. So if somebody doesn't have a menstrual cycle for whatever reason, pregnant, breastfeeding, and it hasn't come back, or whatever other reason,
You're on the pill.
eating disorders can turn off your menstrual cycle, or
Mhm.
you're postmenopausal, then you don't lose your cycle, you revert to the blueprint of the cycle, which is the lunar cycle. So that's an important thing
Mm.
for women to know postmenopausally. If they were engaged in honoring their cycle, like that thing that you downloaded from my website, The Spiritual Practice of Menstruation, we just continue that with the lunar cycle. And the full
Mhm.
moon's equivalent to ovulation, and the dark and new moon are equivalent to bleeding time, rest time. So the
Mm.
menstrual cycle is such a teacher, as
Yeah.
is birth, as is menopause. Like, if we engage with it as, okay, I'm going to learn about myself here, and I'm going to learn about how I need to be in my next phase as well, then it's not about being broken. It's not about having inconvenient symptoms. It's about the way of life.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. That's what I wanted to just touch on um, at the end here is I find it really interesting, even from there's some women that really struggle. Say we have PMS, PMDD. Maybe we're not even diagnosed with that, but I know myself, I don't really. But some cycles compared to others, I'll be like, whoa, I was like rageful just before my period, or I was really
Mm.
sad just before my period.
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
it's interesting when what I have done is just get curious and go, huh, okay, the period is letting go, you're bleeding. What do I need to let go of? Or what am I like fighting up against that I just need to go, oh, that's actually not going to work. And this is removing the veil, I suppose, because that time in your cycle is the lowest point of all of your hormones. So it's almost like a mini menopause in a way of your cycle because your hormones are at the lowest. I sort of imagine it. Another analogy for you, Jane. I talk about temping bowling. So if you go temping bowling and you have bumpers on the side, fine. You could be out of alignment. You could throw the ball wherever you want and it'll sort of bounce back in. But if you're out of alignment with no bumpers on, you're going to know about it. So it's like that's where you really feel it. And
Oh.
that's sort of what I have put it down to for me and also for other women. It's like, oh, if you're noticing that you have a lot of symptoms with that cycle,
Mm.
then there's things that are out of alignment for you, whether it's lifestyle or
Totally. And
whether
it's
it's
your body
your life.
talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's your
Yeah.
body talking to you. So this season situation we can also bring to the menstrual cycle. So when you're the time of PMS is week 3 of the menstrual cycle. So we've got the ovulation to bleeding is the luteal phase. So
Mhm.
that if we divide the length of that into 2, we have a week 3 and a week 4. And as you said, the hormones are waning.
Mhm.
And so our experience of week 3 of our menstrual cycle, which is been pathologized and turned into PMS, is simply biofeedback for how well or not well we looked after ourselves when we were bleeding. So again, it's
Mm.
the harvest, it's the inner autumn, and it's telling you through your body and how she's feeling and not feeling is an
Mm.
indicator of whether you rested or not, basically. And then, so that is the prequel to perimenopause, when estrogen first starts to dip. And then
Mhm.
that phase just before you start to bleed, where estrogen and progesterone are lowest and relatively testosterone is higher, is the prequel to postmenopause. So we already can get these clues, and also how to work with those hormone levels as a way to prepare for menopause. Like, it's not anybody's fault what happens to you in week 3 of your menstrual cycle or in perimenopause. It's the feedback of your life so far. In the
Mm.
menstrual cycle, it's the feedback of that cycle. In menopause, it's the feedback of your life to that point. So when we look at it like that, rather than random medical events that are dangerous and need to be managed by experts, there's a whole lot we can learn about ourselves, and a lot of, therefore, ways we can prepare. One of the greatest ways to prepare for the big change of menopause or childbirth, pregnancy and childbirth, is to do your inner work, to learn about your red thread. What stories are you carrying unconsciously? And then to understand your birth imprint, what we talked about at the beginning, that's playing out all the time, and to delve deeply into your childhood and figure out what trauma. Everybody experiences trauma to some degree during their childhood, which changes everything and sets up who you are, especially your relationship with authority, which plays
Mhm.
out when we birth. So preparation for birth and menopause are really coming to terms with everything that's gone before. And
Mm.
all the birthing experiences that we have teach us what we need to know to take us to menopause. So it's all connected. There's really no surprises if you have this map. It's all simply a setup. So we can easily predict and prepare for what's happening, because, you know, everybody at menopause doesn't all of a sudden get cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, get cancer and have strokes or whatever. That's a chronic condition that's playing out then, not
Mhm.
like what affects everybody. So I think that that's also something important for everybody to know, that it's
Yeah.
not, you're not doomed at menopause. You're simply experiencing the feedback or harvest of your life.
Yes, exactly. And that's chronic disease, chronic illness by nature takes time to come about. It doesn't just all of a sudden you didn't have diabetes and then the next day you did. It's like
Yeah, it doesn't work
that
like that.
doesn't happen. Same with cardiovascular disease. And that's, yeah, really incredible. The work that you're doing in terms of I sort of I split looking at the body and how we treat it into medical, functional, energetic. And I believe there's space for all types depending on what's happening. Like, I know if I've had a car accident, yes, I want medical help. And if there's, God forbid, something really bad happening with childbirth, I want to be able to have the possibility of having that care. But again, it's looking at that. That's not the first port of call when we're thinking about something that's chronic and we're not listening to our body. So we really have to
Mm.
go, okay, how am I listening to the wisdom of my body? And I think we've sort of alluded to it. It's been that thread throughout this whole episode of there's seasons. You're not meant to be performing the same the whole time throughout your life. You change, and it's accepting that change. I loved what you said about nothing in nature continually grows, like nothing. It doesn't make any sense. It's like, oh, yeah, of course. And it's like, duh, that makes
Oh,
so
yeah.
much sense. But when you look at that, and I think there's a lot of rhetoric, and if you're an entrepreneur or if you're in business or even if you're a mum, it's almost like now it's sort of like this performance and you have to do it perfect every time. And there's no room for, well, there's ups and there's downs, or there's harvesting and then there's growing and then there's putting the seeds down. And it's all cycles. And it's accepting that and accepting the wisdom that comes from all of that, which I think
Mm.
what you do so eloquently, you put it all together in that way. So thank you so much for joining us, Jane. It was incredible. Where can people find you, find all of your wisdom, work with you if they want to?
Thank you. So I have a website, janehardwickecollings.com, and my School of Shamanic Womancraft has a website too, schoolofshamanicwomancraft.com. And you'll find all kinds of online courses you can do, or face-to-face workshops you can come to on the east coast of Australia. I'm coming up to Mullum in November and December. And I have books, a bookshop on my website, and many articles that I've written. And I'm also very active on Instagram.
Yeah, your
So
Instagram is
I
amazing. It's
yeah,
awesome. Yeah.
awesome. Well, I hope so. I want to share information. Currently having a big conversation on Instagram about menopause for women with young children, which is a
Mm.
whole growing group that's not
Mm.
being cared for and are not really clear about what's happening. So Instagram is where you'll get a lot of stuff I have to share. And yeah, so I've basically got face-to-face workshops and an online version of that. And
Sure.
then 1-day workshops, but also 8-day workshops and year-long programs that are online now that you can be guided by a teacher who I've trained. And I've also turned Shamanic Womancraft into a modality. So
Mhm.
this is the lineage I carry. So I carry the lineage of my teacher, Janine Pavati Baker, and I have created the School of Shamanic Womancraft and the modality of Shamanic Womancraft that can do all the things that I've just been talking about of connecting the dots in your life, your red
Mhm.
thread, your birth imprint, your childhood experience, and then all your other rites of passage and all that to just see what the theme of your life is so you know what's going on. So I have lots to offer women who are feeling lost or challenged to really help them to do what you so beautifully do, to help them return to their body wisdom.
Mm. It knows the answer. It really does. I know
Totally.
whenever I sit down with a patient, the last question I have after all of their intricate history, I look at the medical, the functional, the energetic, everything. The last question I say is, if you knew your body was always on your side, what do you think it's trying to tell you? And 95% of the time, they already know the answer. They
I
already
know,
know.
it's so awesome. I know, it's
Yeah,
so awesome.
we
But
do.
because we live in the cult of the because we live in the cult of the expert, we've
Mm,
been trained to not trust our inner knowing, but to look outside ourselves to the experts for the knowledge. So it's
we
quite a
realize that
return.
we're the expert. It's being able to
Mm.
connect and trust ourselves. So, yeah. Jane, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
If this episode resonated with you, take a moment to think of the woman in your life who might need this too. Maybe it's a friend who's been feeling exhausted, a sister searching for answers to chronic symptoms, or someone who just needs the reminder that feeling good in her body is her natural baseline. And if you haven't already, subscribing is the best way to spread this message and make sure you keep getting the answers and resources you need. Together, we're redefining how women connect with their bodies. And I'm so grateful to have you as part of this community. So, I invite you to get curious with me. If your body isn't the problem, it's the solution, what do you think your body's trying to tell you today? Please remember, this episode is for educational purposes only. Always consult a qualified health practitioner before making any medical decisions. Every body is different, and so is every healing journey.